Last night, former President Trump said that his campaign had been informed that one of his top advisors was hacked by the Iranian government. We've got a lot more on that ahead, but we begin with our interview with Mr. Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance. We sat down with him in Cincinnati Saturday morning before the news broke about the hack. You supported the Supreme Court ruling recently on mifepristone, the so-called abortion pill, that ruled opponents lacked the legal right to sue over the FDA approval.
That's right.
This drug is used in like 60% of all abortions in the United States. In a Trump-Vance administration, would you use the FDA to block access to this drug?
Well, no. What the president has said very clearly is that abortion policy should be made by the states, right? You, of course, want to make sure that any medicine is safe, that it's prescribed in the right way, and so forth. But the president wants individual states to make these decisions because, look, Margaret, California is going to have a different abortion policy from Ohio, which is going to have a different abortion policy from Alabama. But that was actually
different because after Dobbs, the Supreme Court took up this case.
Yeah, but
right.
like
they
you
viewed
said,
it as different.
Sure, but like you said, on a matter of legal standing, but I think that what we really want is when states and voters in those states make decisions, we of course want the states and the federal government to respect those decisions, and that's what President Trump has said, is consistently we need to get out of the culture war side of the abortion issue. We need to let the states decide their specific abortion policy, and look, what President Trump and I want to do on family policy is make it easier for families to start in the first place.
So at his presser this past week, Donald Trump seemed to indicate he was open to restrictions on mifepristone. He was asked by a reporter about this, and he said there are many things on a humane basis that you can do, but also give a vote. So he did seem to be indicating he's open to restrictions on this particular drug.
First of all, even some of the reporters who were in the room in that press conference said it wasn't clear what the reporter was asking. Maybe he couldn't hear that person super clearly. So I don't want to put words in President Trump's mouth. What he has said very clearly in the debate is that he agrees with the Supreme Court decision, but more importantly, he wants these decisions to be made by the states.
You personally signed on as a senator to a letter to the DOJ demanding it shut down all mail-order abortion operations under the Comstock Act. So would you seek to enforce that law differently?
Well, what we said in that letter, Margaret, is that we want doctors to prescribe this stuff to ensure that it's safe. I mean, we do this with antibiotics, we do this with a lot of antidepressants, and we just want the FDA to make sure that doctors are prescribing this in a safe way. That's all that we ever said, and I believe that that is how President Trump feels about this, is again, you want the states to make these determinations. You also want to make sure the FDA is ensuring that these medications are safe for anybody who's taken them.
It's been on the market for decades, and the FDA does say it is safe, but
antibiotics are safe, but we want to make sure they're prescribed by doctors and that doctors are properly monitoring this stuff so that people don't get hurt. And
of course,
Margaret, we've talked now, I think, for 6 questions about abortion.
I'm still trying to get a clear answer. So for an FDA commissioner that you would be part of choosing, where that commissioner stands on this drug, would that determine whether or not they are chosen to be put in this key role?
I think President Trump has clearly said there are no litmus tests on this particular issue. He just wants to make sure that drugs are safe and effective before they're out there in the market. And of course, that doctors are properly controlling this stuff so that people don't get hurt. And again, Margaret, I mean, we talk about abortion. I think President Trump's views on abortion are extremely clear.
You've been talking about the concern about the low birth rate in the United States of America, which is well documented. You said people without children should pay higher tax rates than those who have children, and the U.S. should look at lowering income tax rates on women who have multiple children, and you pointed to Hungary as a model for that. How do you plan to implement that policy?
Well, it's called the child tax credit, and we should expand the child tax credit. If you think about what the child tax credit does...
So you and the Biden administration agree on the child care tax credit?
Well, we think it should be bigger. I think President Trump and I believe in an expanded child tax credit, but we also, importantly, want to actually get this thing done. The child tax credit has languished, thanks to the Biden administration, because Harris has failed to show fundamental leadership. Chuck Schumer's been unable to get it through the United States Senate, and we want to have a more pro-family policy. Now
there was just a vote on on this. You know that.
Well,
you weren't there.
But Margaret,
it was a messaging bill. I'll give you that.
It was a show vote.
I'm with you on that.
And if I had been there, it would have failed.
So tell me specifically what you want to do to expand the child care tax credit, because it's like $2,000 per kid right now.
Well, I think one of the things you can do is make it bigger per child. I think we'd love to see it at a higher dollar value. And again, President Trump and I have proposed that. I mean, look, I'd love to see a child tax credit that's $5,000 per child, but you, of course, have to work with Congress to see how possible and viable that is. We've also proposed legislation, Margaret, to end this practice of parents getting these surprise medical bills where they go to the hospital, they have a baby, they chose an out-of-network provider, and they come home with unexpected bills. I've actually sponsored legislation to end that practice. So we have a whole host of pro-family policies that are out there. And again, on the Harris administration, I got to push back against something a little bit, Margaret, because when these comments where I said parents should pay lower taxes via the child tax credit came out, the Harris administration immediately jumped and said, we disagree with this. The Harris campaign said, we disagree with this. So did they want the elimination of the child tax credit, or were they just being careless in responding to remarks that I made 3 years ago? I don't know. They should clarify it, maybe in an interview with you, but of course Kamala Harris refuses to do interviews with anybody.
We hope to have her on and ask her about that. So the child care tax rate, you said $5,000 per child is what you would like to get to. Where would that kick in?
I'd like to have a broad-based family policy and a broad-based child tax credit, Margaret. Again, we've talked about doing this for a long time. President Trump has been on the record for a long time supporting a bigger child tax credit. And I think you want it to apply to all American families. I don't think that you want this massive cutoff for lower income families, which you have right now. You don't want a different policy for higher income families. You just want to have a pro-family child tax credit.
So you have personally opposed universal child care. How do you solve the child care crisis in America?
Well, what I've opposed is one model of child care. We, of course, want to give everybody access to child care, but look, in my family, I grew up in a poor family where the child care was my grandparents. Right. And a lot of these child care proposals do nothing for grandparents. If you look at some of these proposals, they do nothing for stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home dads. I want us to have a child care policy that's good for all families, not just a particular model of family, and that's what I've said.
So what do you mean by that? There would be like a credit per kid if it's a stay-at-home mom, credit per kid if it's grandma.
Yeah, exactly.
They get a check
That's exactly what I proposed. I'm just saying that I don't want us to favor one family model over another. If you've got grandparents who are at home taking care of the kids, I think they deserve to be treated the same way as other family models by their government.
Gay families, they'd be included. All families.
All families would be included, of course. All families would be included.
What about really young kids? Should 3- and 4-year-old kids have access to preschool?
Well, look, I think that certainly some families are going to choose that, but again, some families are going to choose grandparents and so forth. I think our view...
Well, that's child care. That's different than
our view...
preschool.
Well, very often preschool is child care, is at least a form of child care. I know that when I went to preschool,
my
parents
used... preschool.
Yeah, and we used it as child care, right? You're hoping the kids get a good education, but you're also doing it because you want to provide child care for your kids. I don't think there's anything incongruous or inconsistent about that. And I think, look, we believe that we want to make it easier for American families, Margaret, to make their own choices on this stuff. When we talk about school choice, of course, school choice would apply to all families. It would apply to all parents. And we would just want parents to have choices.
Including for preschool, because in many public school systems, there is no preschool. That's why I'm asking.
I think that we want parents to have choices, Margaret. Like I just said, we want them to be able to make the choices that make the most sense for their family. For some, it's going to be preschool. For some, it's going to be daycare. For some, it's going to be having the kids stay at home a little bit longer. We just want the government to treat everybody equally, regardless of whatever education or family model you have.
So you have a very young family.
I do.
You have a very accomplished wife, Usha, who she went to.
I'm very proud of her.
Yes, Yale, Cambridge. She clerked at the Supreme Court. We heard her on stage at the RNC. You gave a recent interview to Megyn Kelly.
Yeah.
And you spoke about white supremacists attacking your family.
Sure.
Because she's not a white person. How concerned are you that this kind of hate would follow you to the White House?
Well, look, it's going to follow us wherever we go because that's the nature of public life in America, and it's disgraceful. Look, I love my wife. I'm very proud of her, I'm extremely lucky to have met her and to have gotten the chance to build a life with her. And my attitude on this is if people want to attack me, attack my policy views, they're welcome to. I signed up for it. My wife didn't sign up for it. And by the way, she's way out of their league, the people who are attacking her. So I wish they would just keep their mouths shut or at least focus on me. But look, it's the nature of public life in this country. My wife's pretty tough and she knows what we signed up for.
I imagine it's hard to keep your temper when you hear things like that.
Yeah, I get pissed off sometimes, certainly. Yeah. When people attack your family, and certainly attack your family for something that no person can control. And I do think that there's been this thing in America where we've said that we should judge people based on their skin color, based on their immutable characteristics, based on things that they can't control. I frankly think that, unfortunately, a lot of people on the left have leaned into this by trying to categorize people by skin color and then give special benefits or special amounts of discrimination. The Harris administration, for example, handed out farm benefits to people based on skin color. I think that's disgraceful. I don't think we should say you get farm benefits if you're a black farmer, you don't get farm benefits if you're a white farmer. All farmers, we want to thrive, and that's certainly the President Trump and J.D. Vance view of the situation. But I do think, unfortunately, when our leaders divide us by race, you're going to have hate on the left side of the political spectrum, you're going to have hate on the right side of the political spectrum. We should just judge people based on individual characteristics and based on merit, and that's certainly what President Trump and I want to do.
But that wasn't born in the last 4 years. I mean,
not at all. But I think that President Biden and Harris have certainly accelerated it. I don't think you've seen anything like what we've seen from Kamala Harris when it comes to handing out government benefits based on people's immutable characteristics. The actual legal enshrinement of discrimination in this country, we haven't seen anything like it in the last 30 or 40 years. Certainly back in the 60s and 50s, we all look at that as a period that we wanted to get away from, and in some ways the Harris administration has re-implemented it. I think it's pretty disgraceful.
Well, in your own movement, that's what I want to ask about, because one of the supremacists who was saying things like this about your family, Nick Fuentes, an avowed anti-Semite, went after your wife. He had previously dined at Mar-a-Lago with Donald Trump. Does this have any room in your movement, in the MAGA movement?
Of course it doesn't have any room in the MAGA movement, and of course...
You disavow him and this.
And of course Donald Trump has criticized this person. Look, I think the guy's a total loser. Certainly I disavow him, but if you ask me what I care more about, is it a person attacking me personally, or is it government policy that discriminates based on race? That's what I really worry about.
We're going to mark this year the 3-year anniversary of the end of the U.S. war in Afghanistan. President Trump negotiated that withdrawal. The execution you've been very critical of as very chaotic under President Biden. But let's look at what you could do if you're in office. There are about 80,000 or so Afghans who were left behind, many of whom worked for the United States. Does America owe them? Should you bring them here?
Well, I think that we should bring people here who helped us and have been properly vetted, and that's very, very important, because a lot of the people the Biden administration has brought in have not been properly vetted.
Are you talking about Afghan vets?
And I think the most important, certainly the Biden administration has let in Afghan nationals who say that they supported Americans but actually did not. We also remember, Margaret, there was a lot when we were in Afghanistan, a lot of so-called blue on green or green on blue violence where people who were allegedly supposed to help us killed American troops. So I want them in our country? Of course I don't. In fact, I wish they weren't on this earth anymore. So we have to be careful about who we let into this country.
I'm talking about people who worked alongside United States service people
and if they're
on the ground in Afghanistan.
And if they're properly vetted, I think that we should help them. Some of them don't want to come here, by the way, Margaret. Some of them would like us to give them safety in another country.
I ask you that because President Trump said a few days ago he'll suspend refugee admissions to the United States.
Exactly, because we're not properly...
But you're saying not in this case.
No, absolutely I'm saying in this case, Margaret, because we're not properly vetting the people that are being let in through these refugee programs. What President Trump said is very important. You cannot show up at an American consulate and say, I helped the Americans, go let me into America because I'm a refugee.
That's not how the process works, you know that.
It very often is how the process works, Margaret. The Biden administration has been scandalous in not properly vetting these people. Donald Trump is exactly right. And again, just because they helped us, allegedly, doesn't mean you have to let them come to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Maybe some of them should go to other countries. Maybe we should help some of them in their own country. And President Trump's exactly right about this. In fact, we know beyond a shadow of doubt that some of the people who have been led into this country are on the terrorist watch list. That is disgraceful.
I think
Trump
now
is
you're
right that we should
conflating
stop
a few
it.
different things. You are now talking about people who have come in through the southern border versus people who were vetted and worked with U.S. intelligence.
We've certainly let in people through refugee resettlement who should not be in this country. Absolutely, we have. We have not properly vetted everybody who's come in.
Do you have something that you've been briefed on?
Certainly, if you look at
a specific example that you're worried about?
I have been briefed privately, but there's also been public reports of people who have come in through the refugee resettlement process who are actually on some kind of terrorism watch list, who importantly were not actually helping Americans, even though they claimed. We got to be careful, Margaret. We have a country to protect, and I have 3 young children. I don't want people walking around the streets of this country who said they served the United States, but because the Biden administration doesn't believe in immigration enforcement, they didn't properly vet them.
Do you view China as a competitor or an adversary?
I think they're both, right? And I think that what we want to do here is build the kind of international order where we can check China. We don't want to go to war with China, but certainly they're an adversary. I mean, they know, for example, the Chinese know that they're manufacturing tons of fentanyl they're letting come into our country. Kamala Harris has done nothing about this. She should apply diplomatic and economic leverage over the Chinese to stop manufacturing this fentanyl, which then comes into the Mexican drug cartels, which they then ship into our country.
The United States has designated some of these groups
this is a
and pressed
scandal.
the Chinese government.
Oh, we could do so much more. Fentanyl is not easy to manufacture, Margaret, and if Harris was applying proper leverage to the Chinese and to the Mexican drug cartels, we would not have so many people dying of fentanyl overdoses.
How do you do that? What's your vision of how do you do that?
I think you walk into Beijing, you talk to Xi Jinping, and you say your entire economy is going to collapse unless you get access to American markets. You need to take this fentanyl seriously, or we are going to impose serious tariffs and economic penalties for not following our laws and not helping us stem the flow of this deadly poison.
And you wouldn't be worried about blowback on the U.S. economy?
I think that we have a powerful economy, Margaret, with the best workers in the entire world. If we need to fight a trade war with the Chinese, we will fight it and we will win it. But we cannot do what Kamala Harris has done, which is be so terrified of using the economic power that we have that she's not even willing to stop the flow of this deadly poison coming into our country.
President Trump said Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi were lovely individuals when he was speaking in Montana last night. You agree with that characterization?
I think that President Trump gets along with world leaders, and there's nothing wrong with him complimenting them as people if it makes him more effective diplomatically. And there's an irony here.
That's different than walking in and laying down the law to Xi Jinping.
Oh, no, it's not actually, because you're better able to lay down the law like President Trump did if you actually have a good relationship with people and they trust you to follow your word. We have to remember that Democrats, including Kamala Harris, attacked Donald Trump for having a good relationship with Vladimir Putin. Well, when Donald Trump was president, Vladimir Putin didn't invade another country. When Kamala Harris was vice president, he did. So maybe they should take a lesson from Trump's playbook about diplomatic legitimacy, because I think Donald Trump got a lot done because world leaders respected him.
J.D. Vance, always good to talk to you.
Thanks,
Thank
Margaret.
you for making time for
Good to see
us.
you.
The full interview is available on our YouTube channel and on our website.